Whew. Actually, if you loop around to your right, you can probably walk in on it.
We're going to build a wall.
The problem here is this gap now becomes a funnel.
Holy!
Without that barrier there, cartels are free to cross their products anywhere that they want.
A wall is an immorality.
These are not the people we want coming into this country.
There will not be another foot of wall constructed in my administration.
Hello and welcome to our special first-hand look at what's going on at our nation's border. I'm Tara Mergener. What you just saw is but one example of the brutal reality spilling out across our border, thousands of times over each and every day. For months, CBN has been traveling there, talking to Border Patrol, ranchers, lawmakers, law enforcement, and citizens, so you can see for yourself what's happening there. We've even gone south of the border to document where this treacherous journey to America begins for many desperate families and their brutal violence so many encounter, believing they'd get in. Now, an up-close and personal look at the tragic reality still unfolding and growing at the border as we speak. The aftermath is shocking. Feet firmly on U.S. soil for the first time. A group of mostly Central American migrant mothers and children smiling on the homestretch. Like the 6,000 others per day reported to be going around official entries at Texas's southernmost point, they believe the journey is a success.
He saw in the news there was a new president and he had more opportunity.
Smugglers see more opportunity too as they navigate dangerous rip currents racing across the Rio Grande one after the other, hour after hour. Mexican authorities watch it happen from the water as U.S. border agents manage dozens, even hundreds at a time, while also trying to keep cameras away.
Can you please not interfere in our enforcement? This is private property. The government does not own this property, but they're telling us we have to leave right now.
During the commotion on shore, scouts give the all clear for another crossing, the distance only about the length of a football field. This is the Mexican side of the border. In the sand, the footprints of thousands of migrants who've waited to cross into the U.S. with the help of a smuggler. It happens all day, every day. Fearing for her own safety, this resident asked we hide her identity. In the last couple months, how many rafts have you seen cross in the time you've been out here?
If I had to give you an estimate, I would say at least 60, 70 per day. Hundreds of people. Most come from Central America, traveling weeks to get here. Nearly all claim to be fleeing violence and poverty.
This is a pipeline that's being filled from much further south than Mexico. The people coming across through the Darien Gap come from Afghanistan and Somalia and Bangladesh and Indonesia and Sri Lanka and Haiti and Cuba and places like that as well. This is a terribly arduous journey, and I've spent a lot of time sort of tracking down the routes that they take to get to the United States. Because what I wanted to know is, who are these smugglers anyway? I've been walking the Darien Gap Trail now for over an hour, up and down these hills. It's incredibly hot. I feel like I've been standing in a warm shower. Imagine being out here with a baby or pregnant or even in a wheelchair. I've seen all three of those things with the migrants in the last 24 hours. They're actually doing that. And it's because they have no idea the smugglers that bring them through here lie to them about how long this is and how difficult this is. And that's why many of them end up dying along the way. These migrants are starting their hike now, but the smugglers are telling me I can't go any further. They're telling me I can't go any further here, and they're telling me I got to leave. They don't want me filming this. They obviously don't want this story coming out. So it's, yeah. Entonces, está bien. Okay, sí, está bien.
What will you do now that you're in the United States?
Pues aprovechar la oportunidad que se nos ha brindado ante todo, ¿verdad?
Along the way, many become victims of abuse and exploitation.
Veníamos en un bus como ese y se subieron en Veracruz. Un agente de la PGR nos revisó y nos quitó todo lo que traíamos, dinero.
Often at the hands of drug cartel members, they pay thousands of dollars to get them here.
Especially we have women and little girls coming in thousands. And we all know that women and little girls have a 60 to 80% chance of getting raped.
They're being taken advantage of all along the way. Maybe a plurality of the women who start out in Colombia are going to be sexually assaulted or be forced to sell sex or something to get to the next step. They're going to be robbed. They're going to be shaken down, even by the Colombian police, even by government agencies like that in corrupt countries like Honduras or El Salvador or someplace like that.
Not all who make the trip survive.
Sometimes see dead bodies floating and stuff because they try to make it across, or they get snagged on the bottom, or whatever reason they don't make it.
Still, many do, including the unaccompanied children crammed into this overflowing detention facility in Donna, Texas.
Every facility we have along the southwest border is over capacity right now. Just yesterday, we had over 10,000 people in Border Patrol custody. That's much higher, especially under COVID constraints, than any facility should have.
We saw makeshift facilities like this one under a bridge intended to go undetected by media and other observers. Migrants are then sent to area shelters and in a matter of hours, free to go.
They're released so they can continue their legal proceedings here in the United States, somewhere where they're going.
Only recently is the Border Patrol confirming the record numbers being released into the U.S. without court dates, as the system grows more overwhelmed by the day. In March alone, an estimated 171,000 plus entered the U.S. illegally, 5 times more than a year ago. By year's end, the number expected to reach more than 1 million.
As soon as they get it to this side, they go ahead and flag down Border Patrol because they want to get caught, because they know they're going to get processed and then shipped out to wherever they're going to get shipped out. They're not going to get deported back to their country.
I have a soon-to-be daughter-in-law who's from Armenia. They want to get married in the United States. They're supposed to wait to get married for 3 years in order to get the interview to find out whether or not they can get the fiancé visa. Or we can fly her to Mexico. She can walk across the border. She can turn herself in. They will give her a check and a plane ticket to our house. It's ridiculously difficult, almost impossible, for someone to come legally.
Signs of the migrant surge, like these pans left behind, are obvious on the border, but experts say the problem is increasingly being felt across the nation in areas far from the Rio Grande Valley. Armed with an assault rifle and 100 rounds of ammo, this smuggler races to make the handoff. Suddenly, several men jump from the back, making a break for the next car, hoping to outrun the law. CBN News obtained this shocking video, recorded by the smugglers themselves. And this isn't some scene playing out in a third world country. It's on the back roads of a small South Texas town.
Someone's going to get hurt. There's a great sense of unease now that they know that they are carrying weapons, and it has been documented now. Intel hasn't wanted to share it, but it's gotten so brazen now that they want the public to know.
This is Brooks County, some 70 miles north of the Mexico border. And it's clear evidence that ground zero of the immigration crisis is much larger than the border itself.
U.S. Highway 281, it heads north, is the main corridor for human smuggling or drug smuggling.
It's known as the corridor of death. And we see why within minutes of our arrival in Falfurrias.
We are going to the very south end of the county, on 281.
Deputy Don White responding after another body turns up deep in South Texas brush country. One of dozens found in the past few months.
We can see the prints.
The footprints pointing in the direction of remains, decomposing under the hot Texas sun, not far from the beaten path. His body moved by animals from its original resting place, belongings scattered about the shrubs. Deputy White says it looks like he died a month ago, likely left behind by his group.
F-13, time of death, 3 o'clock even.
Either he was dropped and they went on, or he became incoherent from environmental stresses and he started wandering.
An hour south, hundreds of thousands of women and children continue to surrender to agents after being dropped off at the river's edge by so-called coyotes hired to smuggle them into the U.S. For those trying to avoid agents, however,
due to past criminal history or past border interceptions, that sort of thing,
the second hurdle may be even harder. Getting around the Border Patrol checkpoint in Brooks County along a major human smuggling route. On the journey, move from stash house to stash house in the Rio Grande Valley until the cartel gives the all clear.
They're loaded up into pickups, vans, whatever, and brought to the south side of the county and dumped down into the brush. And then they're expected to walk up to 3 days through the brush.
The miles-long trek to meet the next smuggler waiting to usher them deeper into the U.S. is punishing. This is sandy loam, similar to what's on a beach. It's very heavy to walk on, and migrants on it hour after hour become exhausted. Scorching summers, freezing winter nights, and brutal winds, all taking their toll. Bodies and skeletal remains often revealing signs of painful, even violent deaths.
You know, the cartel has also been known to kill people that didn't pay up.
With the human flood crashing the southern border this year, drug cartels are raking in billions from migrants desperate to reach the U.S. Some with bad intent.
On the vessel jumped out.
So many people are coming across that gives the cartel even more opportunities to transfer people like MS-13, the 18th Street, pedophiles. Pedophiles love to come back to America.
They regularly capture people coming through the Darien Gap who are on a terror watch list. And most people don't know the U.S. Border Patrol has agents in Panama in the camps where the refugees first get to when they come through the Darien Gap.
Law enforcement scrambles to stay vigilant along highways. Resources in these parts are spread thin. Many border agents once patrolling this county gone, assisting with a massive influx on the border, leaving the cartel to take full advantage.
It'll be a while before someone can go out there and respond to the notice that someone is going through the brush. That brush is wide open. 944 square miles of nothing but private ranch lands.
In the last few months, it's really picked up, and there are profound property damage with smugglers that are being pursued by law enforcement. And it's not only that, it's armed smugglers going through private property, rural roads, at high speeds to drop off their load.
Loads that law enforcement officers say defy dangerous odds in the wilderness and are fanning out in greater numbers across America. With record numbers of people and families now flooding the border, the big question, what is the Biden administration doing with all of them after they're picked up by Border Patrol? It's a complicated issue, especially when young children are involved. Well, many migrants were and continue to be sent back. Lenient policies now also make it possible for countless more to be admitted. Keep in mind, this all happened during the height of the COVID pandemic. Thousands allowed to enter the U.S. without even a COVID test, while American businesses and churches were forced to adhere to COVID mandates. We saw firsthand how they were handled and processed, and learned how even U.S. citizens were helping illegal immigrants evade police. Sneaking into Texas's Rio Grande Valley, now by the thousands per day. Most traveling through multiple countries to get here in search of the American dream.
Were you worried that once you got here, if they would let you in or not?
Yes, I was worried, but God granted this opportunity.
Record numbers taking that same chance, nearly all paying smugglers to get them here, then turning themselves into border agents. And within hours, dropped off by the dozens at area shelters. Bus stations.
We supply them with backpacks that'll have water and blankets, masks, a snack pack.
And even airports. On our plane to Dallas, migrants packed the flight, some with first-class tickets. Due to the lenient immigration policies now in place, most will never face a judge.
Usually you're given a court date and you are supposed to appear, which most don't appear, but at least you're given a court date. Now they're not even given a court date.
Once again, we have to begin with the rising cases of coronavirus in the U.S.
Not to mention, this is all happening during a pandemic. Forget temperature checks, as Border Patrol only tests migrants with symptoms. Others are checked at pop-up sites like this one at the Brownsville bus station. We saw how those testing positive were placed across the room from others, yet they still boarded buses bound for cities across the U.S. Organizations like Catholic Charities are also in the middle of the chaos. The difference we saw is that they test hundreds of migrants each for the virus. Anyone testing positive packed into vans and sent to area hotels where they are urged to quarantine.
We'll test them every single day until we see a negative test result. In the meantime, they get cared for, meals and anything they need.
We're in the middle of a pandemic. For so long, we've been told, stay home. Kids cannot go back to school. Keep your business closed. I don't understand what their comprehension is, to allow so many people to come in.
According to law enforcement, that large number is also due to smugglers who are cashing in to the tune of billions of dollars.
Do you think that the increasing numbers coming over right now is going to create more opportunity for these smugglers?
Yes, I firmly believe that it's going to increase the numbers of stash houses. The individuals that are crossing the river They pick them up along the river in a vehicle and bring them to an area such as this one here.
Migrants, some kidnapped, others running from the law themselves, are often kept in deplorable conditions as their keepers demand more money to take them deeper into the U.S., often along with drugs.
What kind of people hide in stash houses?
We've had elderly from male, female with a newborn, children.
Until recently, Border Patrol's intel team conducted hundreds of stash house raids per year, but we're told many have been reassigned to caring for the migrants once they cross the border, leaving law enforcement to catch smugglers on the next leg of the journey on the nation's highways and back roads.
They try alternative routes. They're always looking to find different routes to smuggle, whether it's humans or narcotics.
Hidalgo County constables are among those getting federal money to pay for overtime on border security. That includes traffic stops like this one, where we saw officers suspicious of a speeding car full of young men heading north.
This is just one of a number of these stops just in the last, really few minutes.
Our deputies, along with Border Patrol, have conducted more than 8 to 10 traffic stops within the last 30 minutes. And obviously they got one.
92, 95.
And as we learned of another disturbing trend, U.S. citizens are increasingly helping migrants evade authorities. All of this leading to the same question: who and how many more migrants get away each day? And many Americans fear for the country's future.
Perhaps no one feels the illegal immigration surge more than those who live along the border. Destroyed property, dangerous smugglers hiding from law enforcement, plowing through their land every day, children left behind, dead bodies turning up in bushes and in fields. Residents at the border say they have never seen this many people before trying to come across, and say they feel abandoned.
Stop, dude! Oh my God! Holy! Oh my God! Oh my God!
Little by little, our original Constitution is being ripped apart. This is our bottom field, part of the Nye plantation that has been here since 1923. We have a field on the northwest side there and also on the northeast side here. You look straight through there, you see the dark trees, and then you see a light area, which is a field. That field is in Mexico. So the Rio Grande River is just right here behind us.
In terms of people coming across, the situation has changed over the years.
It's whopping. It's a humongous change. There was no fence, no wall.
Dottie, who asked us not to use her last name, has a bird's eye view of Mexico and a deep appreciation for those who keep watch.
What they go through to protect us and our properties. Without our Border Patrol, we don't have a country.
Growing up, Dottie watched as laborers from Mexico went back and forth freely between countries.
The people who came over then were super nice people. They'd come over, they would work for the day and go on back over. As years went by, then the government decided, oh, let's change things.
And through the years, Dottie says, the people have changed too. Routinely damaging private property or hiding there from the law. And another change, not everyone is from Mexico anymore.
You have all these people coming from different countries here, and now just hordes of them that come through at a time. So how do you tell the good from the bad?
Behind the tree line is the Rio Grande River. In the short time we've been here, a couple of people appeared off in the distance, continued walking across the field, then quickly disappeared. In addition to this being farmland, it's an area often used by scouts to make sure Border Patrol is not around.
Since President Biden took office, illegal entries in the U.S. hitting new highs, on track to reach 1 million or more this year.
It is the direct consequence of policy decisions by the Biden administration to stop building the wall, to return to catch and release, and to end the stay in Mexico policy.
Amazing what these smugglers, drivers of these trucks can go through.
Desperate to be heard, South Texas ranchers use social media to blame Biden for the flood of Central Americans and others sneaking across the border.
They ought to send them all up there to the White House, put them in there with him.
Texas is providing charter buses to send these illegal immigrants who have been dropped off by the Biden administration to Washington, D.C.
Who in their right mind thinks this is okay? Who in their right mind, when they say amnesty, give them a free pass to come in, they promise them health care, they promise all sorts of stuff. These are not the people we want coming into this country.
Across thousands of miles of ranch lands, migrants running from the law have long posed a challenge, even many miles from the border.
Mother, baby, and father.
And as numbers swell at the border, more migrants are heading north through these parts. Ranchers say they've never seen so many people.
This country's really good, humane, Mr. Biden.
We come upon their camps where we find a bunch of backpacks, trash. There's been numerous ranchers that have been assaulted while they were opening a gate.
I got you.
Come on. This is where these children were brought across and dumped here alone. This is where they slept last night. Look at this. Look at this.
There's also concern about Biden's plan to ground the Border Patrol's eyes in the sky that have dotted the South Texas skyline for years.
It's like we've been abandoned and left alone. And all the technologies that were in place, the aerostats that were on private property north of the Border Patrol checkpoints, those have all been removed. There's no valid technology being used today to help landowners in the checkpoint areas north of the border.
Agents see illegal crossers and their smugglers also taking advantage of gaps left in the border wall since Biden ended construction the day he took office.
All of the equipment is stopped, the crews are all gone, and there are still miles and miles of gaps up and down the borderline.
Dottie, who once opposed any wall on her property, now fears it will be torn down.
Those people in D.C. want to say, get rid of this wall. Get rid of it. Open up the borders. Let them come across. I won't be able to live here if they do that.
She's not the only one. Landowners throughout South Texas report an alarming increase in home and shed break-ins, expensive fences and irrigation lines cut, drugs left behind, and high-speed chases tearing through their yards. And for each arrest, overworked border agents and other law enforcement make, many more are getting away.
We definitely need to regroup, and have a strong immigration reform. Without that, it's going to continue.
Are we moving in the wrong direction, do you think?
As of right now, as we sit here, yes, it's definitely the wrong direction.
It's not just the good people that are doing this, it is the increase in the bad people who are taking over.
And like a growing number of South Texans, she hopes she's not the next to leave.
The wall, it was by far the issue most fiercely debated in the lead up to the 2020 election.
Trump vowed to finish it, Biden vowed to stop it. So what happened to all the materials already designated and paid for by taxpayers to finish up the wall? And what happened to the people and the companies who are counting on that project for their livelihoods? And has the new plan worked? Here's what we found. All along the Texas-Mexico border,
we're going to build a wall.
A scene frozen in time.
The Biden administration chose to do nothing.
Once busy work sites,
government contracted crews are set to break ground in the spring.
It was good for the economy, it was good for the valley, it was good for the people.
Sit silent. Gaping holes, the hallmark of a border wall.
People are going to come into our country, but they're going to come into our country legally.
Gone bust.
There will not be another foot of wall constructed in my administration.
With a stroke of a pen, President Biden bringing an abrupt end to Donald Trump's 4-year fight to finish this wall. While the wall is mostly out of the national spotlight, the issue remains hot in the Rio Grande Valley, the busiest spot for illegal immigration in the country.
Right here in New Mexico, it stops and we have an open border with just anti-vehicle barrier. We're going to call this the Biden border from now on. And the problem here is that the wall stops there, there's a big gap, and it picks up on the other side. This gap now becomes a funnel for anybody who wants to enter the United States illegally. That's unfortunate because this problem could easily be remedied. The steel bollards needed to fill this gap are already bought and paid for, stacked nearby and ready to be installed. But Biden's order to halt construction means these fence panels may never get installed, and one construction worker told us he believes they will simply be abandoned, left in the desert to rust away. CBN News reached out to one of the largest contractors that was working on this project, and we're told the stop work order will immediately cost over 5,000 construction jobs while the government tries to decide how to proceed. These contracts have already been awarded, so it may actually cost more for the Biden administration to halt construction than it would to simply allow these panels to be put to use. CBN also asked the Army Corps of Engineers for comment, but has yet to receive a reply. But that's not all. A few miles away, this construction yard holds more than 3,000 already completed wall panels, which works out to more than 6.5 miles of fence that could be stopping drug smugglers and human traffickers from entering this country. Instead, it's likely these hundreds of tons of purpose-built steel will never be put to use, at least not under a Biden administration.
It's 7:29, News Talk 710 KURV.
Wall or no wall?
In my audience, the KURV audience, which is generally business-minded, they're business managers, business owners, and just hardworking people, overwhelmingly, this audience, absolutely, they'd say yes to a wall.
During the Trump administration, the U.S. government paved the way for hundreds of additional sections of wall to be built along the 2,000-mile border. Biden ditched the project his first day in office.
They're not worried about how it's hurting us here.
A delight to Democrats.
A wall is an immorality.
And environmentalists.
For every mile of border wall that they are building, they are clearing 20 acres of habitat.
But a blow to outnumbered agents and officers tasked with slowing the flow of drugs.
Without that infrastructure, without that barrier there, the cartels are free to cross their products anywhere that they want.
And criminals increasingly able to bypass them and get deeper into the country. Human smuggling arrests are now skyrocketing here in the Rio Grande Valley. In Hidalgo County alone, they are now making several a day.
The numbers are just going up. They'll go down for a week, they'll come right back up the next week. So I don't see an end in sight.
Behind the scenes, a struggle of a different kind.
We have one of the highest poverty rates. It's really just very disappointing
Sections of the wall like this one can be spotted all over the Rio Grande Valley now. When the Biden administration stopped construction of the wall, an estimated 5,000 people lost their jobs.
What was your reaction?
Well, it took it a bit hard because I was counting on that. I was counting on that job.
So was Grancelli Construction, hired,
And people came down from all over the country and hired local people.
then fired when the wall was nixed. How many people did you have to lay off after this happened?
14.
This is where a section of the wall was going to be.
Yes, right along the river here was about a 4.7 mile segment.
But the company is still on the hook for the millions it poured into a cement plant built just for the wall, leasing land,
It's about 35 or 40,000 a month we're carrying.
and buying equipment he says the federal government won't let him use or sell.
We're waiting. They say they're going to reimburse everyone, but it hasn't happened yet.
At this site, there are exactly 1,087 steel panels that would have been enough for 2 miles of border wall. This dried up paint can and some cobwebs, reminders of what might have been.
It's just a bad deal. I laid off 32 employees.
AJ Steel LLC, who made these panels, also remains in limbo.
How much money did you lose when this stopped?
I'm at it right now a little bit over $300,000.
As bills pile up.
I sent a certified letter last week demanding payment
From the contractor?
from the contractor. And he basically told me, he said, I ain't got the money to pay you.
And you're stuck.
Yes. And now the owners off of this property are asking me for $20,000 a month until all this material is moved out of here. At the end of the day, if I don't get my money soon, I'll just take all this and scrap it.
Like Garza and Grancelli, many South Texas contractors are hoping Governor Greg Abbott will make good on his promise to resume building the wall where Donald Trump left off.
Had the border so closed, the best ever, and now it's coming through at levels that they've never seen before.
Using $250 million in state money and taking donations to fill holes along the 1,200-mile stretch of border here.
Texas is stepping up and doing a job that is truly the federal government's job.
A plan that doesn't sit well with everyone.
Definitely not allow states to enact or govern themselves when it comes to this federal issue because it's not their issue.
Polls show Texans are split over whether or not to build the border wall. Meanwhile, the country is on track for 2 million illegal crossings like this one in 2021.
It's been little more than a year, and the change at the border has been so swift, overwhelming, and again, devastating to many Americans and migrants alike. And the surge at the border has not slowed either. News of families getting through, tricks to make sure you get sent to a shelter and funneled into American society are being shared with family and friends, encouraging even more people to come. So where does it all end? We discuss that and more with a very special panel of guests next. We've got a couple of people here at CBN. Reid Klass, he is a photographer extraordinaire and has been to the border a couple times this year. And Chuck Holton, war correspondent who does some very serious, dangerous reporting in parts of the world most people would never think to go. I think it's fair to say that we don't see a lot of what's happening in the United States in the mainstream media. You just don't see. One of the things Reid and I are told, and I've been told over and over, is, gosh, I've never seen that before. No one ever told us that. But you, Chuck, are seeing this from a completely different perspective that definitely there's not a lot of reporting on it. What is happening before they ever get to Mexico and cross the southern border into the United States?
Right. So when you ask the question of what it looks like, this is a pipeline that's being filled from much further south than Mexico. It's not like there's a travel agency you can go to in Cuba that will book you a ticket to Suriname and have somebody pick you up there and drive you all the way up to the U.S. southern border. It doesn't quite work like that. there are certainly gangs who work certain areas, and those gangs will take people from point A to point B within that area and sort of dump them off at the next step. And then another group of people will pick them up at that point and drop them off at the next step. But it's not one, entity that's taking them all the way. It's kind of like what used to hear about in the Great Depression with the hobo network, where the hobos would go around and beg for food at people's houses. And if there was a particularly nice family that would feed you pretty well, they would put a chalk mark on the curb outside their house. And so other hobos coming by would be able to look and see, oh, that's a nice family that'll probably give me a meal. But instead of doing it with chalk marks, now they're doing it with WhatsApp groups and Facebook groups. And they're passing along information of which way people should go and not go to get through Nicaragua or to get through Costa Rica or what have you. And what a smuggler looks like is the taxi driver who gives somebody a ride to the next border. The smuggler looks like the Panamanian government. The smuggler looks like the hotel person or the family who takes in these migrants and gives them a place to stay and hide from the authorities when the authorities come through to do a sweep. That's what a smuggler looks like. They're not all malevolent. There are even church groups that facilitate and assist. They give them things that make the trip easier for them. And anything that's done to make the trip easier is going to result in more migrants. And that's just the reality of it. That's just how it works. So it's a big industry. And that industry accounts for the reason why people keep coming, because there is a pathway, a pipeline that's been put together. It's not one, cohesive organization doing it. It's a whole bunch of people that are just doing their part along the way to get people further north.
Yeah, exactly. And meantime, the drug cartels are making tons of money from all these migrants, paying them off, and whatever drugs, are coming through or involved. We know that more drugs are coming over the border now. And, Chuck, we talk about all these people coming up through. Reid, you had never been to the border before when we went about a year ago, and we had a conversation before we started on the way over, possibly on the plane, if I recall, that I imagined for you it would be a lot different than you imagined it would be. I had been covering the border since 2019, but this was your first endeavor. So I guess I'll start with this. Was it different than you thought that it would be?
Oh, very much so, yeah. I think the first word that comes to mind is just mind-blowing. I didn't really know where to stand on the whole immigration border issue. We're in an era with so much media information coming out all the time. You read things from different outlets and you're just not sure what to believe. But going down there and seeing it in person, I think it was hard to take in the sheer amount of people who are crossing the border every day. And we were just in the Rio Grande Valley, just in South Texas. It's one hot spot. But people are crossing the border in Arizona, New Mexico, and California also every day, and in droves. And just to see people huddled under these bridges and groups of people crossing the river, it's a constant cycle. It was really hard to take in, but it makes you realize when you're there, seeing it in person, makes you realize how astronomical the issue is and how many people are crossing the border every day.
Right. When I went over the first time, what stunned me was that people were literally turning themselves into Border Patrol. Most people have no idea that this is what's happening, that their vision of what's happening there, particularly in the Rio Grande Valley, is completely different than what is actually going on. Chuck, one of the things from your reporting that I took away was that you mentioned in at least one of the reports that there are many peaceful countries they go through before they ever get to the United States. What keeps them coming when you could give up early and maybe save yourself part of the arduous journey? Because it's awful for them.
What keeps them coming is the pull factor of the financial gain, the financial benefit that they'll get from getting to the United States. I've tracked many of these migrants. What I'll do is I'll meet them in Colombia or even further south than that, wherever they come in to the Western Hemisphere, and then I'll track them all the way into the United States. I'll make friends with them on Facebook, and I'll keep in touch with them. And I've even visited some of them in the U.S. after they've been here for a year. I had a Cuban couple that I met just stepping out of the jungle in Panama. They were in very bad shape. And so I kind of made friends with them, and they came into Texas through El Paso. They went to Dallas, and they immediately went, they knew from these WhatsApp groups that they're on and stuff, if you go to a certain church, there's a municipal or state program you can sign up for if you're going to be living in Texas as a migrant that will give you money to help you get on your feet. And so they went and they signed up for that program. And they didn't sign up as a married couple. They signed up as two single people because then they get twice as much money. Then they got on a bus and they went to Miami. And there was another program in Florida that's similar. And so they signed up for that program as well. And they signed up as two single people again, so they got paid twice as much. Then they both got jobs under the table, working for cash, about $15 an hour. Suffice it to say that these people who had been making jointly in Cuba $45 a month, within about 6 months of making it to the United States, they were making about $60,000 a year. And at least half of that was coming from programs where they were signing up for multiple programs in multiple states. And I've often said, if somebody's handing out cookies, you can't blame people for getting in line for the cookies. What you have to do is blame the people who are handing out the cookies. And so very good-hearted, intentions for many of these programs, but the migrants have learned to game the system and to really reap the benefits of that. And then a lot of that money gets turned around and sent right back to Cuba to finance the next wave of people coming back up here. I saw some of the same migrants you saw getting on the airplane in McAllen, Texas, and stopped a couple of them and said, "What's in that folder?" And they showed us what was in their folder. And one of the things they got was that they each got a check for $1,400 from the Office of Refugee Resettlement Services. Why wouldn't they come? I mean, you can't blame them.
Yeah, it makes you wonder how we're going to sustain this, because right now there's no end in sight to this. And Reid, I think one of the subjects that gets a little bit lost in all this is the communities. We talked to a woman named Dottie in the Rio Grande Valley. Dottie was 80-something years old. You walk out her door and in her yard is the wall. And years ago, she didn't want it. She fought it. There's articles of her saying, "I don't want this, it's wrong, I don't want this in my yard." Now she's afraid that they're gonna take it down.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great anecdote of somebody who's had their life transformed because of illegal immigration. I mean, her property has, I was just walking around her land and you see like scraps of clothes and, tatters and shoes and stuff down by the river. So she has had a front row seat. And the fact that the wall is now bisecting her property, it doesn't
striking.
get any more dense and real than that.
It's striking to see that wall. Like, you can't even imagine this. You're like, oh my goodness, right in her yard. There's Mexico. And she told us years ago that in the 70s, that it was a different feel, that it was people coming over. They were day laborers. They'd come over, a lot of them. And they would work for the day, and they would go back and forth. So it's interesting. I think about her every day.
If I can just comment on that, I think the real difference between then and now is that they didn't have all these programs that bring everybody up and start this chain migration cycle. We didn't need the deterrent of the wall, because the deterrent was, if you try to rob this rancher's house, he's going to shoot you. It was that kind of a world back then. That was the way things worked. There was this big issue about family separation back during the Trump administration. Everybody was lambasting Donald Trump for separating families. Well, let me tell you about the real family separation issue. When a guy comes to the United States from Guatemala, and I've been to Guatemala, you can go up in the mountains and find actual ghost towns. There's just a few people left back there that are all women and children, okay? And those women and children, you go interview them and they say, well, Dad and our oldest child went to the United States, and they said they were going to go and get asylum, and then they would make some money and pay for us to come up and join them. But with the crush of people coming into the U.S., It's gotten to the point where, like, for you to get a court date for an asylum hearing, it's going to take 3 years. There's literally 1 million people in line ahead of you. In that 3-year time period, you could not leave and go back home and visit your family, because if you did, you'd have to start over again. And so those families were separated for 3 years. Well, guess what happened? Dad would end up getting a girlfriend in the States, getting her pregnant, and ending up with a whole other family in the U.S. And so we talked to those people, those women and children in Guatemala, and they'd say, yeah, he was sending money for a year or two, but then it just dried up, and we haven't heard from our dad in 4 or 5 years now. He just disappeared.
I've heard that story over and over. It's absolutely amazing. You know, all these people coming over, you know, 2 million, they said at the beginning of the year, it's going to be 2 million. They're absolutely on track for that, maybe far more.
Talking about 8 million people during the Biden administration, the 4 years of the Biden administration, 8 million people.
It's incredible. And we mentioned this also, that Reid and I went to a community a ways from the border called the Corridor of Death. We have a story where we pulled up and, they're like, oh, we find these bodies. We're like, well, what are the odds we're going to be there and that's going to happen? It happened in the first 5 minutes. And I'll let you tell the story, because it was tough to see.
Yeah, I mean, we spent the day with I think he was ex-military guy who just volunteers for the sheriff's department now. And his primary job is to search for deceased migrants. Mm-hmm. And it's just another day of work for him to find a dead body out in the desert, in the brush. Somebody who, and those are people who crossed illegally and likely had a criminal record, who weren't going to be excited to find Border Patrol. They were the ones who were truly trying to evade law enforcement. But yeah, I mean, it's just, I think they average like 40 to 60 bodies annually that they find in the county.
And I've been in touch with them. They're way ahead this year. I haven't talked to them in a couple of months, but way ahead. And it's just been dozens and dozens. We got there, Reid, and they literally pulled out off the ground, a full skeleton of somebody, head to toe. It was amazing, which is one of the stories we did. Chuck, what's going to stop this? Do you see any end in sight? I mean, do you think there's even a desire to stop this in the U.S., or is there just too much political motivation and it's just going to go on and on?
Think about the effect that this is having on legal immigration. It's much to do with how complex and ridiculous the system is. There's so much bureaucracy. There's so much inefficiency. It's almost impossible for someone to come legally. So since it was made impossible, people just go, well, why not? And they just go to Mexico and they cross illegally. I think the whole thing needs to be revamped. And that, is going to be hopefully the job of whoever the next president is.
Yeah, and it's important to point out not everybody wants to game the system, right? So there's plenty of people out there who want to come here legally, want to pay taxes, want to do this the right way. I've met a number of them, but it's like when everyone else is just right, why should I? And unfortunately, it sends the wrong message that they're just, at this point, there just doesn't seem to be any end in sight. And we don't know how this is going to turn out, and it could get a whole lot worse before it ever gets better. Chuck, stay safe out there in your intrepid reporting. It's super work. And Reid, thanks for coming with me and being so great on at least 2 trips so far, and certainly more to come. And we've learned a lot, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's been very eye-opening.
All right.
Yeah.
We'll be right back.
So much tragedy has played out at the border. But God is still working in the midst of it all. CBN's George Thomas has the remarkable story of a pastor who followed God's call when it made absolutely no sense whatsoever. The results were amazing.
6 miles from Tijuana and a short distance from the U.S.-Mexico border lies one of this city's poorest neighborhoods.
This area is on the outskirts of the city. Not everyone knows about it. Not everyone wants to come here either.
It's easy to see why. There are no paved roads. The hillside is strewn with garbage. There's no sewage system here, and crime is rampant.
When we moved here, there were only cows, horses, chickens, and people with a lot of needs.
In 2011, Gustavo Banda and his wife Zaida Gulen moved to Canon de Alacran, or Scorpion's Canyon, after hearing from the Lord in a dream.
It was a clear mandate from God to move here, even though there was absolutely nothing in this place.
Teachers by trade, the Mexican couple were touched by the overwhelming needs of the community. Most folks here were poor subsistence farmers.
God gave me a dream that I had to build a church. We worked for 8 months, day and night. We knew God was going to do something special, but nobody had a clue about what really was going to happen.
That year, Templo Embajadores de Jesus, or Ambassadors of Jesus, was born in the heart of Scorpion's Canyon. Banda held services on Sunday, then hit the rugged roads the rest of the week, going house to house, ministering to physical and spiritual needs. In 2016, that focus drastically changed when thousands of Haitians, escaping poverty and back-to-back natural disasters, began to carve a dangerous 7,000-mile path to the U.S.-Mexico border. Many landed on the church's doorsteps, less than 30 minutes from the San Isidro border.
Within months, 22,000 Haitians had arrived in the city of Tijuana.
The church became a place of refuge.
I did not know, nor did I ever imagine, that there would be so many people in the church.
Since then, Banda has opened his church doors to migrants from all parts of the world.
It started with migrants coming from Haiti, Africa, Pakistan, and the Middle East. Today, we mainly have people from El Salvador, Guatemala, Ecuador, Nicaragua, Colombia, and some from Mexico. It's hard to tell, but we estimate about 35,000 people have come through the church, easily.
1,200 were staying in the church the day CBN News visited.
We feed them 3 times a day. We try to help them with all their needs. At nighttime, the entire church becomes one big giant dorm, where everyone sets up their beds on the floor, and sometimes there's no room to even walk on the floor.
Most migrants stay here an average of 6 months before trying to legally cross the border. Church volunteers run a school for the children, oversee computer training, and provide other skills that will help migrants prepare for their new life in America. Area churches and NGOs also pitch in with food and other essential supplies.
The most important thing for the migrants to know when they get here is that there is hope. And although they have left their families behind, all of us that are here have become their family.
Come Sunday, everyone picks up their bed and dresses up for a lively church service.
I know that I only have a little bit of time with them, so my job is for them to know as much as they can about Jesus, baptize them, and send them to the United States believing in Jesus.
He once had a desire to be a missionary to Haiti. Not anymore.
I even started learning a little bit of their language, but when I wanted to go to Haiti, Haiti came to me. And after Haiti came, all the other nations started coming to this place. I don't have the numbers, but for years we have been baptizing so many of them, and many more are surrendering to Jesus. And that's my calling now.
Thanks for watching. I'm Tara Mergener. Good night.